We live in a world where everyone wears a mask carefully crafted over years of social expectations, parental teachings, the looks of others, and rejection. We wear it to work. We wear it in polite conversation, in meetings, in social media posts. Carl Jung called it our persona, the part of us we present to the world. But behind that mask is something else, a deeper part that doesn't want to be seen. It's not evil, nor is it the evil that many people think it is. It's the shadow. It's all the parts of us that have been rejected, forgotten, deemed unworthy, unloved. And as Jung wrote, you don't become enlightened by imagining light, but by making darkness conscious. Think back. Have you ever overreacted to a simple comment? Have you ever suddenly become angry over something trivial and then wondered, why did I do that? Have you ever seen someone and instantly disliked them for no apparent reason? All of these moments, Jung argued, are when the shadow shows up. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask for permission. It emerges from the subconscious, takes over for a moment, and then retreats, leaving us feeling empty, regretful, and sometimes even afraid of ourselves. So if the mask is something we actively create, then the shadow is something we passively forget, but both live inside us. And paradoxically, the more we try to keep the mask perfect, the more the shadow has the opportunity to reveal itself in the most unexpected ways. Carl Jung did not create the concept of mask and shadow to judge people. On the contrary, he believed that it was an inevitable part of psychological development. We need masks to live in society, but if we live only with masks, we will lose contact with our true self inside, and the shadow, if not recognized, will become a hidden force, controlling our lives without our knowing. Perhaps that is why we are often surprised by a person's most genuine moments. Not when they are smiling brightly in front of a crowd, but when they think no one is watching, when they snap at a waiter, when they frown at a naughty child, when they express their dissatisfaction over a small detail that doesn't go their way. Those seemingly insignificant moments are where the true personality leaks out, because no one can maintain a mask forever. It is in those unconscious gaps that the true nature of a person is revealed, and Carl Jung believed that these are the most valuable signs if we know how to look. If we observe quietly enough, we can see the darkness hidden behind the smile, the hurt hidden behind the anger, and sometimes the kindness hidden behind a tough shell. But what matters most is not recognizing the shadow in others. It is in ourselves. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it destiny." We cannot change what we cannot see, and we cannot be free while we are bound by the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. So the real journey is not about becoming a perfect person. It is about being brave, daring to look into the darkness within, daring to take off the mask when necessary, daring to admit that, at times, we are selfish, angry, or hurt. But it is that admission that is the door to maturity. In this video, I want to invite you on a journey to explore two seemingly small moments that have the power to reveal the whole of human nature. Two moments when the mask often falls and the shadow appears. Jung may not have said what they were, but he left enough clues for us to find them in our daily lives. The first moment is when you have power that others don't have. When you can choose to be kind, but also to ignore without being judged. The second moment is when you lose power, when things don't go your way, when helplessness sets in. These are the two moments when the shadow side is most likely to surface. And if you've ever wondered, who am I when no one is watching? Then the next two experiments may be the truest mirror you've ever seen, not the self you wish you were, but the true self that's quietly controlling you every day. Are you ready? If so, come along with me, because this journey might change the way you see others and yourself forever. There is a simple test you can do anytime, anywhere. It requires no measuring equipment, no interview questions, no personality assessments. Just observe how people treat those who can't be of any use to them. Waitresses, cashiers, garbage collectors, children, people with disabilities, people who have no power, no influence, no ability to threaten or help. That's when the truth begins to emerge. Carl Jung wrote, The ego only becomes fully visible when it is placed in a relationship of power. We do not truly understand a person when they are confronted with an equal, but when they are in a position of superiority, when they have the power to reject, to disregard, or simply to ignore, when they know that their actions will have no consequences, no reaction, no one to talk to. It is then that the social mask cracks and the darkness begins to seep out. Imagine a businessman walking into a fine restaurant. His suit is perfectly tailored, his voice is confident, his eyes are piercing, he greets his peers with firm handshakes, his smile is full of meaning. But when the waiter brings him the wrong order, his eyes suddenly change. No more patience, no more courtesy, just a scowl, a deliberately lowered voice, an impatience, no swearing, no rage. But the contempt is clear. It's in the fleeting glance, in the way he doesn't bother to say thank you, in the silence that carries distance and power. Jung would not call this behavior bad, but he would call it unconscious. A person is unaware that they are being controlled by the ego, that their arrogance is a manifestation of an unacknowledged shadow. For Jung, the shadow is not just anger or jealousy. It is also complacency, coldness, a lack of connection with the real self. The humble, vulnerable, emotional, empathetic self. The human ego tends to measure its own worth through comparison. It feels safe when it is above others, when it knows that it is in control of the situation. And so, when it encounters someone inferior, the ego has the opportunity to demonstrate its superiority. But it is in those moments that the true personality is revealed, not through the big things, but through the smallest details. A swallowed greeting, an uncommunicative look, a deliberate indifference. Think back to the last time you went to the supermarket. Did you look the cashier in the eye? Did you thank the person who bagged your groceries? When you saw a cleaner, did you step aside respectfully or walk past him like he was invisible? These actions happen so quickly that your brain doesn't have time to analyze them, but your subconscious registers them clearly. Not just other people's subconscious, but your own. In his research on depth psychology, Jung argued that the collective unconscious, the invisible memory shared by all of humanity, reflects very clearly repetitive patterns of behavior. History has given us countless examples of individuals who appear moral and exemplary, but are cold and cruel when faced with the weak. The perpetrators of atrocities in war are often ordinary fathers and neighbors in everyday life. They are not born evil, but it is the disconnection from the shadow, the denial of the parts of themselves that they do not want to face, that makes them fall into a state of apathy. A character like the Joker in cinema is a prime example of the shadow that has been abandoned for too long. In many versions, the Joker was once a weak man, forgotten by society, tormented by the system, and finally rebelled by swallowing all of his darkness, then projecting it onto the world. While not excusing his actions, we can understand. The disconnect between the self and the shadow is a fertile ground for cruelty to grow. Jung once had a dialogue with Freud and said that he wanted not only to analyze mental illness, but also to understand what makes a person whole. And in that journey, facing the shadow is an indispensable step. The shadow does not disappear when we deny it. It just changes shape and hides in every daily behavior, especially when no one is looking, when there is no benefit to preserve. There is an interesting paradox. When you are truly empowered, when you don't need anyone to please you, then every act of kindness becomes truly valuable. Not because the other person deserves it, but because you choose to be true to your human nature. That is where kindness is not a performance, but an inner truth. And if you think it's only other people who fall for this test, stop. Think about the last time you were tired and someone was annoying you. The last time you got angry at your child, or at the waiter because they did something wrong. The last time you walked past someone without saying hello. You may think it doesn't matter, but those are the subtle moments when the shadow leaks out into the world. Jung believed that growth comes not from being right all the time, but from being aware enough to observe yourself when you're wrong. That awareness is the key. No one is perfect, but the person with depth is humble enough to learn from every little action, You can choose to be kind even when no one else is noticing. You can look the underdog in the eye, not to show off, but to remind yourself that you were there and could be there again. Because deep down, no one is truly superior to anyone else. We are just individuals learning to live with our masks and our shadows. And if you want to know who a person is, don't look at how they treat their superiors or their friends. Look at how they talk to the waiter. That's the first test of power. And it will reveal more than any resume or speech. What will you do in the next experiment? Not for anyone to judge, but for you to realize, how am I living when no one is watching, when there is no benefit, when all that is left is the choice between kindness and indifference? Because it is in that moment that true character will quietly speak. Imagine an important morning. You've been preparing for days for a potentially career-changing interview. You're dressed, your documents are ready, and you're primed for battle. But as you leave the house, just minutes before the scheduled time, your car suddenly breaks down in the middle of an intersection. There are no taxis around, your phone is almost dead, and time is cutting into your hopes. Your heart is pounding, your forehead is beaded with sweat, and you feel like you're suffocating. In that moment, what do? Do you scream, bang on the steering wheel, call someone and let out a rant? Or do you take a deep breath, accept the inevitable, and find another way? Carl Jung believed that one of the truest moments of human nature is when we lose control. When the ego no longer has the steering wheel, no longer has the power to decide, what lies deep beneath the surface of consciousness will rise to the surface. Helplessness for many people is more than just a situation. It is a measure of the thickness of your character, a measure of the maturity of your soul, a measure of the depth of your relationship with yourself. In the process, Jung calls individuation, which is the process of returning to one's inner wholeness. An indispensable step is to confront the reactions of being deprived of control. Because the ego only truly manifests when it is challenged, not when it is in its safe zone. We all know that feeling of being squeezed, being stuck in traffic while running late, losing important data after hours of work, being misunderstood and unable to explain, or simply waiting in line for 20 minutes only to be told the system is down. These situations may seem small, but the impact on the human psyche is as strong as a shock. What is your reaction? Do you sigh and accept it silently? Or do you clench your fists, your eyes harden, your words change? Do you blame yourself, others, or the world? Jung believed that it is in moments of chaos that the unconscious emerges most clearly. The shadow, the repressed part of the self, does not stay still when you lose control. It uses that rupture to break free, sometimes violently. Harsh words, extreme thoughts, actions you would rather not remember are signs that the shadow is rising. And paradoxically, the more outwardly calm and high-status people are, the more likely they are to lose control when things don't go according to plan, because they are so used to being in power, so dependent on the world operating perfectly. When something goes off track, the sense of disorientation becomes terrifying. It's not just anger, it's the subterranean collapse of a worldview where the ego is used to being the center. In movies and novels, there is no shortage of seemingly rational characters who, when faced with loss or error, become violent, extreme, or depressed. But real life is not much different. There are normal, gentle people who suddenly turn into yellers when they are late. There are people who fall into depression over a small failure, not because it is too big, but because the ego cannot accept the denial of control. So what separates the inner adult from the person who has never faced his shadow? Jung suggested that it is the ability to recognize rather than identify with emotions. When frustration arises, the conscious person does not deny it, nor does he act on it, but simply observes it. He feels the anger, the anxiety, but does not let it become him. He does not say, "I am anger," but "I am experiencing anger." The difference seems subtle, but it determines behavior. It's not easy. Jung never said the journey of introspection was simple, but he believed that if you practice self-observation over and over again, each time you lose control, you move toward inner freedom. Every time you choose to breathe instead of yell, to be silent instead of blaming, you disempower your shadow from acting for you. And the thing is, our reactions to challenges leave their mark. In our relationships, in the minds of the people we meet, in our self-perception. A single outburst can ruin a relationship that took years to build. A single uncontrolled remark in a moment of stress can become a painful memory for the person you love. So the second test, the test of helplessness, is not just a test of the individual, it is a test of compassion, of human connection. The attitude you adopt in a crisis will determine not only who you are, but also what legacy you leave in the lives of others. You may not be able to control the car breaking down, or the system failing, or the other person not understanding you, but you can always control how you react. That is the rare freedom zone that Jung believed was the basis for developing a full self. Not by suppressing emotions, but by looking at them, understanding their origins, and then choosing differently. The next time you feel your heart racing with anger, your throat tightening with injustice, your head spinning with confusion, stop for a moment, take a deep breath, observe yourself, and ask, is this the response of the person I want to be? That simple question may not change the situation, but it will change how you are in it. Because in the end, as Jung said, one does not find the light by avoiding the darkness, but by entering it, facing it, and learning to step out in awareness. In moments of helplessness, you may lose the outside world, but you find a precious map within, the map that leads you back to yourself. And that is what makes the difference. Not power, not status, but the courage to walk in chaos while maintaining compassion. We've all failed both of these tests, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes uncontrollably. A thoughtless remark to a waiter, a cold look at someone in a position of power, a surge of anger when things get out of hand. Then comes regret, or worse, a quick brush off. But in truth, these moments are more than lapses in behavior. They're manifestations of something much deeper. The invisible prisons our minds have been trapped in for so long. Carl Jung once emphasized that the unconscious parts of ourselves control our lives like a destiny. And most of us go through life without realizing these silent barriers. Uncontrolled reactions, unkind moments, are not simply personal faults. They are the result of a defense mechanism that is formed very early in our psychological life. From an early age, we learn to survive by adapting to our environment. Children cannot survive on their own, so they need to be loved and accepted. And to get that acceptance, they are willing to sacrifice many parts of their nature, their sensitivity, their weakness, and their unreasonable needs. Children learn to hide their tears, control their anger, and behave properly in order to be praised. But the important thing is that those rejected emotions do not disappear. They are pushed into the dark area of the soul, a place Jung called the shadow. The shadow contains more than just negative desires. It also contains the parts of the truth that were once considered inappropriate. A child who was scolded for being weak may grow up to be unable to express emotions. A person who was looked down upon for being poor may carry an invisible inferiority complex with them for life, and then express it by scorning those who remind them of it. The ego, instead of confronting the shadow, tries to build an image of the opposite, strong, successful, in control. But when circumstances go awry, that shell cracks, and the darkness emerges. That is why in the two tests, when we have power and when we lose it, the shadow is most easily revealed. In power, we easily become arrogant to suppress old feelings of inferiority. In powerlessness, we easily become angry because we feel small again. These reactions are not inherently evil. They are cries for help from a part of the soul that has never been healed. Have you ever found yourself behaving like a wounded animal in a cage, growling not out of hatred, but out of fear? Have you ever felt like a child left alone in a dark room, crying for someone to comfort you, but the adults outside just ask you to be quiet, tough, mature? These images are not poetic or superficial metaphors. They are psychological truths confirmed by Jung and many psychoanalysts. Every irrational behavior in the present is often an echo of an old pain that has not been heard. And so, if we just punish ourselves for failing the other two tests, we will continue to circle around in guilt. The thing to do is not to deny the reaction, but to ask, what is it that I am trying to tell me through it? Who is it that is being hurt? Is it the child who was ignored? Is it the person who was controlled to the point of fear of losing control? Jung believed that every journey to true maturity begins with making friends with our shadow, not to let it control us, but to understand that it is a part of us, a part that needs to be acknowledged, loved, embraced, not pushed away, because what we don't love in ourselves will come back to hurt us and those around us. When you scream at a loved one in a moment of stress, it may be your ego protecting a part of you that was damaged long ago. When you ignore someone who is vulnerable, it may be avoiding memories that made you feel weak. And when you can't control your anger, when you fail, it may be your fear that you will never be good enough. These are all signals. But we've been taught for so long to deny our feelings, to hide our fears, to be strong instead of being honest. Being honest with yourself is the beginning of freedom. It's when you realize that you are not your anger, not your shame, not your past. You are the one observing all of it, and you can choose to respond differently. And it is in that awareness that the door to healing opens. Not by trying to be good by force, but by being honest enough to recognize our own wounds, our own defenses, our own failures. Forgiveness begins not with the other person, but with the gentleness we show to the part of ourselves that is not yet understood. If you have failed these two tests, it does not mean that you are not worthy. It only means that you are not connected enough to yourself. And that is not the end, but an invitation to begin, a journey of reflection, healing, and choosing to grow, not for anyone else, but for your own peace. Jung once said that those who do not face the darkness will see it everywhere, but those who dare to enter it, with a small lamp in their hands, will begin to see the way. Not to destroy the darkness, but to walk with it, in awareness and kindness. Because sometimes the kindest people are not those who have never reacted wrongly, but those who understand why they have done so and choose not to do it again. We have talked a lot about the shadow, the hidden, the repressed part, the part that reacts when no one is watching, when we lose control, when the truth within us rises to the surface. But Carl Jung did not stop at analyzing the shadow. He did not just describe the hidden aspects of the human psyche. What he pursued most deeply was the path that leads humans back to wholeness, where we no longer have to divide ourselves into good or bad, light or dark, strong or weak. That path is called individuation, the process of individuation. Individuation is not isolation. It is the process of integrating the disjointed parts of yourself. It is a process in which you gradually recognize your shadow, listen to it, understand it, and then learn to integrate it into your conscious life. Not to live by it, but to be free of it. You no longer have to run from anger, jealousy, fear, but instead you can talk to them. You no longer try to be the perfect version of yourself to be loved, but dare to be yourself. Whole, contradictory, authentic. The first step in that journey is recognition. You have to dare to see the parts of yourself that you have ignored. You have to be honest about the times you have acted out of control. You have to accept that you are both kind and selfish, generous and jealous, mature and childish. This is not surrender. This is the beginning of awakening. Next is integration. This doesn't mean you let yourself go. On the contrary, it means you bring the shadow into the light, bring it into awareness, and learn to talk to it. When anger arises, you ask, where do you come from? When the feeling of wanting to control everything arises, you stop and ask, what am I afraid of losing? Each time you do this, you open a crack for the shadow to come out, not as a monster, but as an old friend who has never been heard. And finally, acceptance. Not acceptance in order to stop, but acceptance as a foundation for change. You can't heal something if you keep denying it. You can't grow if you just run away from a past you've never stopped to understand. Jung believed that it was in this process of acceptance that one truly grew. Not by overcoming the shadow, but by becoming big enough to embrace it. This isn't a journey of a day. It could be a year, a decade, or a lifetime. But every step you take, every time you stop to breathe, to wonder, to not react the same way, is a step toward freeing your ego from the grip of your unconscious. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to have the courage to look deeply into yourself and choose differently, little by little. And if you're in a rough patch, if you ever find yourself reacting in a way that you didn't expect, if you ever treat someone badly out of frustration or fatigue, know that it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a better person. Because the only thing that keeps you from staying stuck is not looking back. And when you start observing, being honest, asking questions, you're already halfway there. Jung was not just a psychoanalyst. He awakened in us an ancient call to return to ourselves, to our light and our shadow, not to fight, but to live fully, so that in moments of power and disempowerment, we can still be ourselves, not manipulated, not fooled, not deprived of our very humanity. We don't have to shine all the time. We just have to be brave enough to stop running from the darkness. Because the truth is, it is the darkness, if recognized and embraced, that is the deepest, richest, and most beautiful source of life within us. The journey of recognizing and integrating the shadow is not a strange, mysterious path, or one reserved only for those who study psychology deeply. On the contrary, it is a very human journey, very close to everyday life. Carl Jung never called us to become scholars or thinkers to discover ourselves. He only suggested one thing: to observe ourselves in every small moment, honestly and patiently. To do this, you don't need fancy tools. What you need is a mind mirror, a gentle daily practice of turning inward, listening, noticing, and adjusting. Here are 3 simple yet profound steps you can practice anytime to become more mindful, more compassionate, and more free in your relationship with yourself. Step 1. Identify your mask today. What role are you playing? Every day we get out of bed and put on a mask. It could be the role of the exemplary father, the professional employee, the gentle friend, or the dutiful son. There is nothing wrong with living out these roles. The problem arises when we forget that they are roles and identify completely with them. Ask yourself this every morning. Who am I trying to be today? What am I trying to show others? Am I forcing myself to be always positive, always capable, always strong? And if that mask falls off, am I afraid of being judged? By being honest with yourself about this question, you will begin to identify the expectations that your ego places on you. And when you know what mask you are wearing, you will have the opportunity to let it go at the right time, to return to your authentic, vulnerable, and human self. Step 2. Notice the shadow appearing. When do you react negatively? No one is free from their own shadow. But what separates the conscious from the controlled is the ability to notice. Whenever you find yourself getting angry, feeling jealous, feeling cold towards someone for no apparent reason, stop, take a breath, and ask yourself, what is being awakened in me? Is this reaction really about the situation at hand, or does it evoke something deeper? Your shadow often shows up in unexpected moments. When someone points out a weakness you've kept hidden, when you see someone else succeed and a part of you feels resentful, when you feel left out, misunderstood, hurt. These moments don't have to lead to guilt. They're precious opportunities to reconnect with the unhealed part of yourself. Write down the times you react strongly throughout the day. Not to judge, but to reflect. Each entry is a ray of light shining into the darkness. And that light, however small, is enough to begin to change the way you show up in the world. Step 3. Practice compassion. A good deed when no one is watching. If darkness is healed by awareness and understanding, light is nurtured by compassion. No grand acts are needed. Just choose to do one small act of kindness every day, without anyone noticing. Maybe it's holding the door for the person behind you, sending a comforting note to someone who's sad, picking up a piece of trash someone threw away, saying thank you to the person who sweeps the streets in the morning. Not to prove anything, not to score points, but to remind myself, I can choose to be a good person, even when no one else sees it. When compassion becomes a natural part of your daily behavior, you no longer depend on the opinions of others to define your self-worth. You begin to live as a free person, free in your soul, free in the way you love and connect with the world. These 3 steps are not a magic formula, but they are a solid foundation, an inner mirror to look at yourself in, a little at a time. And then, over time, you will see change happen, quietly, unhurriedly, but truly and deeply. You will find yourself reacting less and more calmly to pressure. You will find yourself softening in situations that used to hurt you. And you will begin to believe that growth is not about hiding your shadow, but about having the courage to live with it, learn from it, and walk with it with an open heart. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to start by asking 3 questions every day. What mask am I wearing today? How did I react? And how did I choose to love in the moments no one else saw? When you are honest with these 3 questions, you are walking the path that Jung laid out. The path back to wholeness, where the ego, the shadow, and the self are no longer separate, but become one living, deep, and truly you.